Great, thanks, Dan. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the myHR Minute. Today, we are talking about a subject that has only grown and grown since back in 2020, and that is remote work and how to stay compliant with remote and hybrid workers. So the first thing, and if there's any one takeaway from the webinar today, it's having a policy or a remote or hybrid work agreement that employees sign off on prior to beginning remote work. And it should address all of the items here. As Dan said, you will get the slide deck and the recording in an email tomorrow. So you will have all these items. The policy or the agreement that you have employees sign, it should apply to all employees rather than making one-on-one arrangements with each employee. Of course, you can have different policies or rules for salaried, exempt management employees and hourly, non-exempt, non-management employees. If you have different policies or agreements that you're having different employees sign off on, you should have valid non-discriminatory business-related criteria for the difference, but generally they should be the same. And in addition to having a policy or an agreement that you have employees sign, a performance discussion before beginning remote or hybrid work should be had between the employee and the supervisor. So, and it should be the same again with every employee in the same position to lay out standards, expectations, what metrics are going to be used to measure performance. That's going to set you up for success because measuring productivity from home may look different from measuring productivity in the office. So making sure you're on the same page at the outset is going to set you up for success. Doing business remotely, your employee's work site becomes your work site, and employment laws apply where the work is performed. So you really need to seek counsel for multi-state compliance if you've got employees in other states. Again, that would be something you would open a ticket for in our Ask an Attorney portal if you have questions about multi-state compliance. Reasonable accommodations, and just because you allow some employees to work remotely as a reasonable accommodation does not mean that you will always have to grant that option to any employee who requests it. If you have a rule like must be employed for 1 year before remote work is allowed, you may have to make that exception to that rule for an employee with a disability who needs an accommodation. Allowing poor performance is not a reasonable accommodation. An employee with a disability working remotely must still meet the performance standards. If you allow working remotely for a non-disabled employee, you're really taking a risk if you deny it for a disabled employee. Again, for qualification requirements, this is something where you are going to want to check with counsel and open a ticket. There may be a sufficient nexus between your business operations and the activities performed in another state where you need to register to do business in another state. If there is a dispute between you and your remote employee, you're going to need to figure out where you are going to sue that employee. If you have employees who travel and work in more than one state, there could be interstate business issues. The state statutes may lay out what is or is not conducting business. So this is all having to register in a state where you have remote employees that is separate from the state where you're headquartered. All of this is going to be very state specific. And this is something that, like I said, is something you're going to want to ask counsel about if you have questions as to whether or not you need to register to do business in the state where your employees are located. State employment laws, as I said, your employee's work site is now your work site. Many paid sick leave laws apply to an employee performing work in that jurisdiction, regardless of the number of employees performing work in that jurisdiction or the location of your headquarters. If a state requires something like sexual harassment training and you have one remote employee in California, for example, you do have to provide sexual harassment training to that one employee because California law applies to the employee performing work in California. So if an employee is in a paid sick leave jurisdiction, even if you are not, you are going to have to provide paid sick leave to that employee who is working in that jurisdiction. And some states require paid breaks. Some states don't. If your employee is in a state that requires paid breaks, make sure the employee is taking those breaks. That's a little hard for a remote employee who may be doing personal activities like putting in a load of laundry between breaks. But you have to make sure that that is being tracked. Unemployment insurance, this is something where you are going to pay your SUTA is generally where the employee performs the work. If there is a choice between states, excuse me, there is a DOL set of rules to determine what state is going to pay out with unemployment. Again, that's something you'd want to open a ticket about because there are such specific rules with the DOL. Tax withholding, many people moved out of the city in the beginning of the pandemic, so you're more likely to have employees, if you have a hybrid arrangement coming in from another state, if you have hybrid workers coming in from another state a couple days a week, you may now have to withhold from both states. This again, I keep saying open a ticket in our Ask an Attorney portal. Some of these things dealing with registering to do business, tax withholding are very, very fact specific and are going to come down to the state where the employee is located. It could be the number of hours of work being performed in a certain state, the amount of work being performed, the type of work being performed, the number of times that an employee might visit a different state if they travel, whether they're meeting with clients at their home office, whether they are getting where they're getting their directions from, whether they're getting directions from a supervisor who's located at your head office in a specific state, or whether they're getting directions from another remote employee. This is all going to affect your tax withholding. So this is something very fact specific that if you have questions, please open a ticket and request counsel on this one. Workers' compensation, again, if you, the employee's work site is your work site, and that means you are responsible for injuries that occur in the employee's home or Starbucks or wherever it is that they do their work. You're going to have to work with your insurer to figure out where the work is localized and where you're going to have to purchase a workers' comp policy. In some states, you can get coverage from your existing insurer and provide proof that there's to an out-of-state insurer to bring an employee into that state. If there's a reciprocity agreement between the states, so you may be able to provide coverage that way, but you're going to have to make sure your workers' compensation covers the remote employee, and like I said, you are responsible for an injury that occurs where the employee is working remotely. And if it is in another state, the laws of that state are going to govern how the compensation is paid out. Workplace safety is very important with a remote employee. OSHA requires you to use reasonable diligence to identify possible hazards in the remote work environment and provide necessary protection. If you require an employee to use a computer, printer, scanner, router, and this could pose a fire hazard if it overloads an electrical circuit, you must make sure your employee knows about electrical safety. If a personal comfort doctrine, if an injury is compensable, if the employee is engaging in activities necessary for their personal comfort or welfare, and it is part of normal working conditions. This means that if your employee gets hurt in their home, going to the bathroom or getting coffee, it is a compensable injury. If they were going to the bathroom in the office and got hurt, that would be a compensable injury. So that if your employee works from home and they go outside to have a cigarette break, just like they would at work, and they slip on the ice and break their leg, your insurer may be paying out the claim. So you can't plead ignorance. Your carrier will not deny a claim for tripping over the dog on the way to the printer just because you didn't know they had a dog. So you need to be very careful in providing a safe employment for your employee. So protecting against these claims, figure out where they're going to work. Are they going to work at home, a shared workspace, like I said, Starbucks? Where will they meet with clients if that is necessary? Identifying things like an overloaded electrical outlet, like I said, can be discovered with photos or Zoom. OSHA does not require you to ensure that their home is safe. Just that their workspace is safe. If the workspace is in the basement and the basement stairs are falling apart, you're probably going to want to step in there. Most compensable injuries with remote workers are going to be carpal tunnel, tendonitis, back pain from people working in poor ergonomic settings, like sitting in bed with a laptop or having a desktop on a kitchen table with their wrists and hands turned upward. There are people you can hire to go out in remote employees' homes and do an ergonomic assessment. You can also have employees take pictures or do a video chat of their home work environment and make corrections or suggest proper furniture equipment. You can require special furniture equipment in order to work from home to prevent injuries in some states. If you require it, you're going to have to pay for it. You can train employees on how to avoid common hazards in their home work environment or the work environment where they'll be working. You should instruct remote employees to report all injuries as soon as practical and train them on the reporting procedure. Information and data security, very important. You may ask, do I need a cyber insurance policy? Yes, if you have workers working remotely, your most important next step there is to get a cyber insurance policy, because the potential for a data breach is going to increase greatly when you have employees working remotely and have their equipment outside of the office where you do not have total control over it. You definitely have to set up rules for protection of data, protection of the equipment, and prohibit things like leaving the laptop or a company cell phone in a parked car. You can have an immediate termination policy if something like this happens. If a laptop or a company cell phone gets stolen from a parked car, you can prohibit other family members, no letting children play with the company cell phone or the printer or what have you. But you need cyber insurance, you need data security, and a policy governing the use of the actual equipment. Expense reimbursement, again, this is all dependent on state law. So this is why you need employment law counsel, particularly if you are operating in more than one state or have remote employees in more than one state. Some states do have laws that require you to reimburse all employees' necessary business expenses. This, again, requiring ergonomic furniture and equipment can be smart and avoid a work comp claim. If you require it, you have to pay for it. Again, it may serve you well to source it and order it yourself rather than telling your employee you have to have this type of chair and letting them run wild and find the most expensive type of chair they can possibly find. And again, photos and Zoom tours is a great way to see what your employees have. In some states, the business expense may not be considered necessary if they have a choice between coming into the office or working at home. So in some states, the business expense might not be reimbursable if they are choosing to work from home instead of coming into the office, because if they did come into the office, the equipment will be provided. And so they are choosing to use that equipment, and they could be getting it for free. So again, you have to know your state. And that is, again, something that if you have questions about your state, please open a ticket in our Ask an Attorney portal. And as Dan said, if you are not one of our clients, you can email info@myhrcounsel.com or go to myhrcounsel.com and check out our packages, ask any questions that you may have about our services. We can set up a demo for you to show you how everything works, and you can start getting answers to questions like the questions that I'm throwing out here today. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you are not one of our clients. Do not hesitate to open a ticket in the Ask an Attorney portal. If you are one of our clients, remote work can be confusing, and there can be sort of invisible pitfalls that can occur that you want to avoid. So please take the time, make sure you're compliant, ask questions, have that policy or have that agreement signed by your employees, so that everyone is on the same page about what the expectations are and what the rules are. So I'd like to thank everyone for participating. I apologize for running us over a little bit today, but I'd like to thank everyone for participating today, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.